Excellent. Well, tell me about your online comics, the Super Fogies and Monsterplex.
Yeah, so Super Fogies is something I've been working on for a long time, kind of off and on. It's kind of been a side project, and it's about a bunch of superheroes who and villains who have now retired and all live in Valhalla, home for the super tired. So they're all thrust together, and really though it's as funny as that premise and ridiculous as that premise might be, it's really just an examination of age and history and what happens when a bunch of people share history together, and also perhaps they share some regrets together, and what does that look like. So it's something I've been doing for a long time. That's really fun. And then Monsterplex was something I did years ago, entered into a contest to get a contract with DC Comics to produce more of it. It was about a movie theater where you watch a horror movie, and the monsters are right there in the audience with you to enhance the experience. And we won that contest, got a contract from DC Comics, and then 1 month later they shut the whole imprint down and voided our contract. So it was a win and a loss, all right next to each other.
Wow. The gamut of emotions there.
Yes, yeah. Well, for a long time, that was my history. It was getting right up to there to the precipice of success, and then failing miserably, whether it was comics or books or whatever. So, film, oddly enough, ended up being finally my way to success.
Cool. It builds character. The Dallas
Yes,
Cowboys used to be known as next year's champions, and finally
right.
they let that motivate them to become perennial champs.
Yep.
So I got a multi-part question about comics. What is the
Mhm.
role slash significance of the visual when it comes to comics? How does the graphic interrelate and enhance the text of a story? Why does it matter? And can it detract from the story? And if so, how is that balanced?
Well, the visual comics, I think, are primarily a visual medium. So you can do comics without words at all. And there are some really great examples of that. And but I like the dance between words and images. And I think what's so unique about comics and what's so strong about them is that um, you really have to select what you see very carefully with a comic. It's not like a movie where you have this continuous image. You really have to figure out what is the salient image that can communicate the most information, that can also tell the story, that can build off of what's come before and can lead into the next one. Scott McCloud has written some great books, particularly his first one, Understanding Comics, that really dives into just how nuanced and intricate a medium for telling stories comics really are, and actually how much history they actually have. It's primarily thought of as an American medium that was invented here in America, but of course it dates back to the hieroglyphics and things like that. But comics offer such a unique way into story that really forces you to make really strong decisions about how to tell a story. And I think that exercise of making comics over the years and having to make those strong decisions made it a lot easier for me when it got into film, because what is film if not just a moving comic in a lot of ways? But of course, there are things you can do in film and that you can't do in comics, and vice versa as well.
Interesting. When you were saying that, you were talking about from the creator's viewpoint, and I'm wondering uh, about the viewer. And does the viewer
Mhm.
have to choose what they're going to see in a comic? It's a static image.
Mhm.
Is there some depth to that?
I
What do you
think that
think?
there is. With comics, you have this really unique experience where you can kind of jump in and out of a story, and you can review a story or jump ahead of it in a way that you can't in any other medium. I can very quickly glance in a comic if feel like I've missed something. I can very quickly glance back a couple of pages or even just a couple of panels and see what that thing was. And I think if you read comics and if you really examine how you read them, you're not just going through it linearly. I know that my eye dances around the page as I'm reading it, and I think that's a very unique experience. You can't really do that with a book. With a prose book, it's very hard to search through text and immediately find something. With movies, you're going to have to rewind or fast forward, and that's an imprecise exercise. So comics, I think, lend themselves to not only do they lend themselves to nonlinear storytelling inherently, because you can structure things differently. But I think just as a reader experience, you can have a very nonlinear experience with comics. And I think most people do without even thinking about it.
I want to say I remember seeing the short version of The Shift on Facebook a few years back. How did you get the idea for the project?
So the idea came from initially just one day when I was driving to work and I listened to the same morning show every single morning. And this particular morning, one of the co-hosts had been erased from the show. Like, he'd been completely rebranded. He wasn't on the show anymore. And they weren't even acknowledging that he ever was on the show. And I had this weird moment where I was just like, my goodness, what is going on? Like, I really like that guy. And I had this moment where I felt like I was the only person who even remembered him because they were just not acknowledging him. And so I had this crazy thought of, well, I feel like I'm in an alternate universe where like he doesn't exist anymore. And so now I'm the only one who even knows about him. And, it was this weird thought. But as I started thinking about it more, I thought about the confusion that I was experiencing in that moment. I thought about other moments in my life where my recollection of something seems very different from the person in front of me. An example, easy example is, people witness a car crash, and the police collect the accounts and everybody's got a different story. Or when my wife is, asking me if I've paid the bills and I say, I don't remember you even asking me to pay the bills. And now we're having a fight about it, because she very clearly remembers and I very clearly don't. And she wants to know why those bills are unpaid. And so I just thought about what if somebody could move people around between alternate universes. In the conception of alternate universes and the multiverse, as it is popularly portrayed in fiction, which is what I'm more concerned about. I'm less concerned about whether or not multiverses are real and string theory and all that. I don't care about all that. But as a part of science fiction, it's got a long history. But part of that that's not really ever explored is what if there are subtle differences, that every decision you make, there's another version of you somewhere in another world that made an opposite decision. And that goes for big as well as small decisions. And what if somebody could weaponize that by shifting people between realities with just subtle differences to cause those moments of confusion, to cause those moments of contention between people? And what if the person who was doing that was the devil? And all of a sudden a story emerged from that.
Nice, nice, very clever. So what's this I hear about a $500 and or in pizza for the short film's budget?
Yeah. So the short film that I made 8 years ago, with a bunch of friends and very talented volunteers and actors. At the time, I was out of work for over a year, and so my family, we didn't really have any money, and so I couldn't pay anybody, but I did have $500 at least. And with that $500, it was basically pizza money or food for the crew, so that we didn't go hungry while we were shooting the thing. And that was it. That was all I could afford to put into the film. And so that was a $500 short film that then turned out better than expected. Got in front of Angel Studios. They helped me fund the rest of the film through crowdfunding and through private investors. And now it's that $500 short film has turned into a $7 million film that's hitting cinemas nationwide.
Nice, nice. You took care of your people. Bravo.
I'm as best as I could. It
Well,
wasn't much.
it fills the stomach for a little while.
Yeah.
I'm wondering now how the dream of a $500 short film would become a $6 million movie or $7 million with well-known actors. Did that dream appear one day, or did it evolve over time, or did you ever dream that would happen?
I mean, for most of my life, no, I never even dreamt I would ever be making films at all. I've always loved films, but I never thought that that was an avenue that was available to me. I didn't grow up with connections or anything like that. And so once I made the short film, I didn't even think then that I would turn it into a feature film. I mean, I thought it'd be really cool to do it. You always have kind of more ideas trickling in the back of your brain. Anytime you tell a story, there's always more to the story than you could put on screen. But I never thought I'd actually get the chance to do it. So it was definitely an evolution. And once I realized that it was a real possibility, that was a big moment. That was a big. I'm not gonna lie. I shed a few tears when Angel said, we want to help you do this, because I realized that this was something that I didn't know that I wanted, but that I really, really did want, and really did want to do. And that was 5 years ago that we first hooked up with them. And so even since then, it's been a very long journey to get to this point. And it's never been inevitable. But at the same time, it has always been something that I've been very driven towards, and I have felt like it was I believed, I don't know, for whatever reason, foolishly perhaps, or maybe not so foolishly looking back now, but at the time it certainly felt foolish to believe that this could happen, because it's a huge leap to go from $500 to $7 million. It's my first time as a writer director of a feature film. It's a giant leap, and it's a leap that a lot of people want to make, but most people don't get the opportunity to. So I know how extremely fortunate I am to be able to do this.
Very cool. How did you do the casting?
The casting, we worked with the casting director, Beverly Holloway, and she is somebody who's been working in the industry for a long time, and is also the casting director for The Chosen and on a number of other projects. And so it was really just about working with her, working with agents. Really what it comes down to is the script. It was about having a script that was going to be attractive to actors, because look, especially the actors that we have who are very accomplished and who are not starved for work. The biggest reason that they're going to sign on to something is if they're excited about the material. And thankfully the response was great to the material. And so we were able to get some, I mean, Neil McDonough, Sean Astin, Chris Palaha, Elizabeth Tabish, John Billingsley. These are people who are extremely, extremely good at what they do. And I'm very proud of what they've done in the shift. I think for most of them, this is among their very best work, at least in my very, very biased opinion.
As a first-time director, what was your biggest challenge?
The biggest challenge was waking up every day and believing that I could do it. It's if you're doing this, it's good to be humble, because you want to, and I did hire people who know more than me, who have had more set experience than me, who are smarter than me. And so it's good to do that. It's good to be humble, to have that humility that you're willing to listen to other people. I tried very, very hard to do it. I'm sure I was not always successful, but I tried very hard to do it. But at the same time, as the director, you've got to lead with confidence. And if there's one thing, especially the actors don't want, is they don't want somebody who's unconfident, who isn't sure. And so I approached every day to set with the attitude of, I'm going to be who I need to be. And that was humble with my crew, confident with my actors, and just open to whatever comes my way, and just trying to do the best I can. And it seems like we pulled it off, but certainly it was an intimidating, terrifying, and extremely exciting experience.
I enjoyed it. You mentioned something that piqued my curiosity. I've never considered how much responsibility a director really has. Like, if you could list off like 5 bullet points, what are some of the major responsibilities you have that we may not know about?
Yeah. So, I mean, as a director, you overall, you're in charge of the vision. It's you who knows what the movie's supposed to be, and you're the only one who knows what the movie's supposed to be. And so everybody is putting their trust in you. And what that means is that means making decisions. If there's one thing that a director does more than anything, it's just make a million decisions. Whether that's the color of the clothing that an actor is going to wear, the look of a prop, that's every single aspect of the film the director has to sign off on. So you have people approaching you all day, every day, asking you to make decisions, and you have to make them very, very quickly because there isn't a lot of time. Second thing, actors. My primary responsibility, especially on set, is working with our actors and making sure that they are well supported and that they know what to do and that they are able to catch the vision. So it's instructing them on their performance, but also leaving them room to do the thing that they do best and trusting their instincts. Problem solving is another thing. Everything goes wrong on a film, everything. And if too many of those things go wrong, and too many would be 3 out of thousands, the whole thing will fall apart. And so what you're doing a lot of times too is just problem solving. And usually you're doing that in conjunction with your producers and your other crew as well. But a good director has to be a good problem solver as well. You're also in charge of communicating what in the world this thing is to the world, which is why I'm talking to you right now. I've got to be able to articulate. I got to not only be able to have a vision, I have to be able to articulate that vision, and that starts with before we shoot and all the way until now, right before release, when I'm having to talk about what the film is. I think that's 4 that I hit, but those are pretty big.
Cool. Wow. Thanks for sharing that. What do you hope people take away from the film?
I hope they take away whatever they take away with it. And I'm not trying to dodge it. I think my favorite films are the ones that have a lot more to say than just one thing. I like films that give me multiple things to think about. Those are usually the films that I revisit the most. I'm thinking of films like Citizen Kane, all the way to something as different from that as The Incredibles. These are movies that if you were to ask people, what are they about? People will probably give you 5 different answers from 5 different people. And I love that. I love films that are complex enough to hold different ideas. And I hope that The Shift is one of those films. If there is one idea to take away, I would say that uh, a lot of the solutions to the stress and challenges of life can come through patience, through waiting, and realizing that things are not always, the change is constant, and whatever difficulty we're going through is not going to be constant. That something will change at some point eventually, and just holding on and waiting for that change, waiting for things to get better. 99% of the time, that patience, that wait is going to be rewarded.
Wow, you perfectly set up my next question. What is your answer to this ultimate question? What is the point of suffering?
What is the point of suffering? Well, that's a big question, and it's certainly the thing that the film is very concerned about. It's a question that's asked over and over again, and certainly there's a point of view that the film takes on that. My thought on that is the point of suffering is so that we can see beauty, and so that we can see light. Everything has an opposite, and unless you understand the opposite of something, you can't really understand the thing. So there is no evil without good. There's no good without evil. There's no beauty without something that's ugly. And suffering can be an ugliness. But when I think back to the times in my life that I have beheld true beauty, when I have beheld goodness, when I have beheld light, those have always been on the back of the darkest moments of my life, the most difficult times of my life, because those difficult times, that suffering is what allows me to appreciate the good that I do have. And so I will never not be grateful for the difficult things. I don't like difficult things. I don't like hardships. I don't like sufferings. Don't get me wrong, but I can't deny the role they've played in my life and my perspective and my empathy.
Wow, you wrote a memoir, The Other Side of Fear, a true coming
Mhm.
of age story of murder, forgiveness, and the peace only faith can bring. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so that's really, that story is really where I learned this idea about suffering and the benefits of it. My father was shot in an armed robbery when I was 12 years old. He was shot 13 times and he lived. And then 8 years later, he was shot in another armed robbery, and that time he was killed. And that experience, um, obviously, the night that my father died was one of the darkest nights of my life. But it was also the night that I experienced love and forgiveness in a way that I never have before. um, I have a faith, and that faith teaches me that there is a love and a forgiveness available to all of us. And I was fortunate enough that night when my father died to be able to tap into some of that, and I gained a perspective on the men who killed my father. Um, that what they had done that night, um, what they had done to him, was not as bad as what they had done to themselves, because physical death is something that I believe has been overcome and that we will all recover from one day. Uh, but spiritual death, the death that comes from damaging your soul. I've sinned. I've done things that are wrong. I know the regret, but I've never killed anybody. I've never done something of that magnitude. And so I realized that whether those men realized it that night or not, and they probably didn't, but one day they would come to an understanding of what they had done, and that would be a pain unlike any I have ever experienced, and that is more than I would want to bear. And that made me feel an incredible sadness for them, and it made me feel love for them, and I forgave them that night. And that forgiveness and that love has always remained with me, and the anger that I felt that night has never returned. And so um, my memoir is about that. It's about how in the world I could have that kind of experience, the things in my life that led to that, that enabled that experience. And it's also got some really funny stories about growing up in there as well.
You know what freaks me out when I think about something you said is the people that did that, that did the murdering, did something greater, worse to themselves than the person they did it to. The Apostle Paul when he finally realized that he had killed his own brothers and sisters in Christ, and
Mhm.
how he got over that, it just blows my mind that somehow God gave him enough grace to not let that guilt just drive him into the ground, because that's pretty intense.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the other thing, and I think that's part of what the shift is about. You've got a guy, the center of the shift is a guy who has done some things he deeply regrets, and and part of the question that he's asking himself throughout the film is, do I deserve the suffering that I'm enduring? Is this something that I
Mhm.
deserve? Um, and what do I really deserve? Do I deserve forgiveness? Do I deserve the light that God has to offer me, or is it something that just isn't available to me because of the things that I've done? It's a question that all of us, I think, at one time or another ask. And sometimes the answer is, yeah, we've done some bad stuff and we kind of do deserve to suffer. And sometimes the answer is no, this has been brought upon us. I didn't do anything to cause my dad to be killed. But it was something I had to suffer through anyway. And there's a lesson in that as well.
How have you handled unexpectedly having a child with complicated disabilities?
Well, that has been a multi-year journey. Our daughter with disabilities, for a long time, we didn't know what they were exactly. We only knew that she was disabled. Her condition is so rare that the doctors couldn't put a name on until actually earlier this year, and she's 18. So we went through 18 years of limbo of not even knowing how long she was going to live, how best to help her. Um, it's been another Job-like experience in my life and in my family's life, where obviously we have a tremendous amount of love for her, and she is a light in our lives. But she's also been a source of a great amount of difficulty because there is a stress that is involved, and the worry of not knowing how to help your child when they need it, and not knowing how long they're going to live. I mean, that's a pretty horrible place to be in. Um, so it's one of those things where so much of who I am and so much of what's in this movie is about her, is about that, is about the length that some trials have in our lives. And people who have chronic illness or children who have gone astray, they understand that not all trials are short. Some trials are very long and don't seem to have an endpoint. With our daughter, we don't know what the endpoint is. It's been 18 years now, and it's still going. We're still trying to figure out how best to help her and how best to be with her. Um, and it's one of those things where you try to find the joy in the moment, even within the trial, which is something that we've gotten a lot better at over the years. And then also you take comfort in the fact that in the next life, all these things will be made right. And we look forward to getting to know her better in the next life when she can fully reveal herself to us.
Wow. Thanks again for sharing your story.
Yeah, of
Um,
course.
Tell me your thoughts on Angel Studios and specifically the Chosen series.
Yeah, so Angel Studios, I think, is doing something really remarkable where, they are specifically trying to put stories out into the world that amplify light. And some people interpret that to mean Christian stories. But of course, it's more than that. It's anything that is good, that ultimately is good, Angel is willing to put out there. And of course, the first thing they did was The Chosen, and what a project to lead with. The Chosen is an incredible series, and tonally, it's doing something so different from any other Christian or faith-based project that I'm aware of. Dallas Jenkins, the creator of The Chosen, is also an executive producer on the shift, and has been a good friend and mentor to me. He is somebody who I think has really tapped into something that people were longing for a while and didn't really know it. They were looking for something different, a different way to express faith, a different way into Christ and His story. And Dallas found it. And it's a remarkable thing. And I think it really opened up a door for people like me who want to tell stories that are a little different, maybe a little darker tonally, in order to get to that light that we all seek. And I think that's what's exciting about what Angel Studios is doing, is that it's opening a lot of doors for a lot of different types of stories, that I think a lot of people who perhaps aren't as enamored with the faith stories that they've been getting so far, and the tonality of those stories and the way that they're told. Not that there's anything wrong or bad about them, but I think that for a long time, our faith stories have been servicing a particular kind of audience, and ignoring some other audiences. And I think The Chosen has been able to tap into those audiences, give those other audiences whose faith is very important to them, but perhaps these expressions over here don't do as much. They're able to look at The Chosen and say, this one is for me. And those are the people that I hope will come and see the shift. I think if they do, I think they'll find something that's very exciting to them.
Right on. I love what you said about telling new stories. Quote, I don't think there's a better vehicle for delivering them than the movies. And that reminds me of the stories I've heard from missionaries who've gone out into the remote bush, so to speak. They set up screens. These villagers have never seen a motion picture before. They had a generator power. And the villagers were shocked at how this innocent man named Jesus was being treated by the Roman soldiers. And they began to throw rocks at the big screen.
That's amazing.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
I have another personal anecdote I'd like to briefly share. I've written a novel, which has been a 5-year process for me, and a story that was screaming and exploding to get out of me and onto paper. It's about high school football and time travel. It's personal to me because I was on the losing end of some very bad officiating and cheating in a high school football playoff game. Me and my high school buddies still talk about the game when we get together. Our school was located at Edwards Air Force Base, which is the headquarters or mecca of flight testing for the U.S. Air Force.
Right.
And if a time machine was ever invented, hypothetically, it would be tested there. So I sign up to be the human guinea pig to go back in time to change the outcome of a small, insignificant event like a high school football game, and hopefully not tear a hole in the time-space continuum. It is my dream to see this novel, which I printed and released about 8 years ago. It's my dream to see it adapted to a full-length motion picture. Any advice?
Oh gosh. Any advice I give you will probably be totally worthless. My way into the film industry, just like everybody's way into the film industry, has been very unique and not easily duplicated. I don't even know how I would do it again. But I mean, if it were me, I would try to adapt that into a screenplay myself, and see what I could do. Some studios, some producers would see that as a bad thing, that authors should not adapt their own material. They can be very, very bad at it and not understand that the jump from one medium to another, because there is a jump. I love working in different mediums. I've done comics, I've done novels, I've done memoir, and now film. So I love jumping between mediums, and I love figuring out what the strengths and the weaknesses of each medium are, and how to play to those strengths and away from those weaknesses. So I would say if you're gonna do it and do it yourself, definitely figure out what the difference is between a novel and a movie, and what is going to be successful in an adaptation. But if you don't feel like that's your way through, then I would say your best bet is to try to seek out a screenwriter that you can work with, and find somebody who you feel like you can gel with and who could understand your story, and try to get them to adapt it. And the reason I would start there is because it's all about the script. You're not going to get anybody to sign on with you and do your thing. You're going to need a producer, you're going to need a director, you're going to need people like this, and they're not going to sign on with you if the material isn't there. So the script is the first thing, and it's really the only thing that matters.
I love what I read in your bio about your wife, your 2 dogs, your 1 cat, and your 3 daughters. And your daughters put together a killer PowerPoint presentation, and you didn't want to come off like a jerk. Why do you think your daughters may or may not follow in your footsteps? It's kind of a
gosh, my daughters are very creative. I'm excited to see what they do. That PowerPoint presentation was one of the funniest and best pieces of marketing I've ever saw. And to my everlasting regret, I did not have a video camera on them doing this presentation, because it was quite the experience. The daughter who primarily put that together, she is now in college, majoring in international marketing and minoring in film. So she is following in my footsteps, and not at all, but also a little bit. She's a cinephile, and has a very creative mind in a completely different way. I think she's a marketing genius, and she'll find her way through. And then my youngest, who was also involved in that PowerPoint, she's really started getting into art and drawing, and telling her own stories, and acting. So I think there's a creativity bug in our house, and I'm excited to see what they do with it.
Right on. Well, since this is a music magazine, let me ask, how important is music in a movie, and why?
Oh my gosh. This is how important it is. We finished this movie 2 weeks ago, and that was when the score finally got into place. And we had done a number of screenings of the film before that. just of the rough cut without the music and without sound design and without effects and things like that, as we were just crafting it and trying to figure out the best edit. But everybody who has seen the movie in the last 2 weeks, since it was finally completed and that score was finally put in place, have all agreed with what the thing I have been contending for months, which is that nobody has ever really seen the film until that score is in place. And the experience people have now with the film versus before that music was in place is completely different. It is like a different movie. And it is a movie that is far more successful than the film that we had been showing prior to that. The music is a character. Our composers Dan Hasseltine and Matthew S. Nelson are incredible musicians, Grammy-winning musicians. The composers also of The Chosen, and what they're doing in this film is, I mean, you're not going to know. First of all, it's from the composers of The Chosen. It's completely different from anything they've done there, and yet it retains the beauty and the majesty and the nuance of what we are so used to hearing from them on that series. I cannot wait for people to hear this score, and I think the movie's 10 times better with it than without it.
Cool. Well, I'm envious of you. The next few days as you lead up to December 1st are got to be very exciting for you. So congratulations.
Thank you.
And
Thank you. I'm excited for this week.
hope you enjoy it. Thanks for your time today. And how can we get more information?
Yeah, you're going to head to angel.com/theshift. If you go there, you'll find where it's playing near you. And if it's not playing in the theater you want, there'll be a button there for you to give them a call and let them know that you want to see it. That's how exhibitors decide what to show, is they want to know there's a demand. If there's a demand, then they'll put the film there. And then, of course, we're on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and TikTok. If you search The Shift, you'll find us quick enough.
Very cool. Well, thanks again. I'm going to try to navigate how to end this conversation and get that recording in my possession. I guess I'll just click the leave button.
Yeah. I think if Angel Studios set this up and you hit the leave button, hopefully somebody's paying attention and will be able to send you that recording.
Yeah, the publicist said they would. So
okay, great. Well then, yeah, you'll be all set.
Awesome. Well, you have a great
thanks
one.
So much, Doug. I appreciate it. It was a great conversation.
You're quite welcome. I enjoyed it myself. Thanks.
Take care.
You too.
That was a short little snippet.
That was 30 minutes, 35.
Not your usual on business.